A hard-fought split for the Brewers in, you guessed it, a rainy weekend in Pittsburgh. Then they came back home from Memorial Day and secured their first winning sweep of the year against the Boston Red Sox. Welcome back to the Brewer Fanatic podcast. We'll break it all down for you and more. Spencer, let's jump right into the action. But before we do, how are you doing on this Wednesday evening?
I'm doing well. Doing well. We didn't get any questions from our followers or listeners this time on how we were doing, so little bit upset about that. No, I'm kidding. But overall, I'm doing well. Again, it's just nice to not be constantly go with everything right now. So still a little bit of time, obviously work and everything still, but not two jobs basically at the same time. And I'm sure you're at least appreciating that a little bit as well at this moment. So yeah, it's been good. A little bit more relaxing, still just a ton of baseball in general, which is never a bad thing, but generally pretty good. How about you?
Not too bad. I'll echo most of what you said. You talked about still a lot of baseball. We have a lot of baseball to talk about, so let's get right into it. Let's start with that series in Pittsburgh, and every series between the Brewers and the Pirates in Pittsburgh must feature a rain delay, and they got it out of the way in game one right away. Kind of a worst case scenario for the Brewers as well. So we briefly touched on this one last week because the game was going on as we were recording last week's episode. So we're not going to go too in depth into all of this stuff, but just the Cliff Notes version. Christian Yelich had a 2-homer game. Joey Ortiz also showing that he's hitting some balls harder again. That kind of a theme for him this entire last week, really. So he hit a 109-mile-an-hour home run in this game, and he hit a couple more bullets to the outfield, especially in that Boston series that unfortunately found some gloves. But he's starting to look, I think, quite a bit better than he did early in the year. So hopefully an encouraging sign. We can talk about that a little bit more as we go along. We talked about how the bullpen situation necessitated an early return for Aaron Savali. He was pulled from what was supposed to be his final rehab start the evening prior, joined the Brewers in Pittsburgh to start. And you could tell he was obviously someone who was probably expecting he would get one more opportunity to knock off some rust in Nashville. He wasn't super sharp, but I think you got to give him credit for battling through 4 innings. 4 hits, 2 walks, 3 strikeouts for him, limiting the Pirates to just 2 runs. And then Carlos Rodriguez, the plan was for him to follow Savali in this one. He didn't technically immediately follow Savali. It was Rob Zastryzny that came out of the bullpen first, and then C-Rod thereafter. And this is one of those things you really couldn't do anything about if you're the Brewers or Pat Murphy. The rain hitting after Rodriguez is already about 20 pitches into his outing, and this is a guy you were counting on for a lot of length. So the Brewers, amid a 2-hour rain delay, were able to keep him hot. He was able to stay hot. He did a lot of moving around. So as soon as that tarp came off the field, he went back out to the bullpen, continued pitching, pitched all the way into the ninth, 3 1/3 for him. The final line doesn't look great, but a really, really big outing for him amid some really unfortunate circumstances, some really dire circumstances for the Brewers, to be honest, with how that pitching situation was. So really good work from him. We didn't get a chance to, at least I didn't go back and watch most of this outing. Vinny Rottino did a good breakdown of it during the rain delay, actually, where he was looking at some of his outings in Nashville, just about how the execution and the stuff was a little bit better than what we saw in his first cup of coffee in the big leagues last year. But good work for him. He would get into a little bit of trouble in that ninth, though. So Trevor McGill came in to finish the game. We talked about it last week. This probably still would have been a game to maybe you try to get away with Grant Anderson there. You still had a buffer of a couple of runs for that lead. And when you look at how the workload would transpire for McGill the rest of the week, you can kind of see how this is the starting point of, man, it would be nice to have that game back. There's going to be more bullpen talk this week, not nearly as much as last week, but it's still a thing, so we'll have to go through it a little bit later. Game 2, the Brewers falling to the Pirates 6-5 in 10 innings. A lot of extra inning baseball for the Brewers this week as well. Freddie Peralta, we've said a lot of good things about him in the way that he had largely stepped up through the first almost 2 months of the season. But these last couple times out, this one and then his outing against the Red Sox, just kind of back to where we were a lot last year, where it's not good enough. I don't want to say it's a problem again because I mean it's a couple starts that haven't been good. I don't think you can overreact to that, even if he's got a past history of this. But 4 1/3 for him on a day the bullpen again could really have used some length from the top pitcher in the rotation. Only 4 1/3, 2 runs, one of them earned, 3 walks and 3 strikeouts. Just a really high pitch count for him. Again, not efficient at all. A lot of wide misses like we were used to seeing in the past. The Brewers offense, though, was able to battle back in this one. William Contreras hitting a go-ahead home run in the top of the ninth. Unfortunately, Abner Uribe blew the save in the bottom of the ninth. O'Neal Cruz hitting his second home run of the game. O'Neal Cruz had a big series this weekend, or this last weekend, I should say. And funny enough, I was like, as these games are going on, I was looking up his career splits against the Brewers compared to usual. He was actually not very good against the Brewers last year. He had like an 89 WRC plus against them. So I think for his career, and this is not counting for that second home run because this is around the time I was looking at it, but I believe his career WRC plus against the Brewers going into this game was 116, and his career mark against everybody else is like 102. So still quite a bit better, but not, he's been good against the Brewers, but he hasn't been absolutely dominant all the time. He certainly was for a good chunk of this series, though. O'Neal Cruz, like, you saw the arm and you could see the power in that bat because he set the StatCast record for the hardest hit ball since 2015, 122 miles an hour. Isaac Collins, once again, helping the Brewers come back again. A lot of back and forth in this one. RBI single in the top of the 10th to take the lead. And then this is where things really got crazy because Abner Uribe went back out for the bottom of the 10th, and things did not go great. Game ends up losing. The Brewers end up losing, I should say, on a wild pitch. Probably one that William Contreras would tell you he could have had, but it's obviously not routine, so you can't score that as a pass ball or anything. It is a wild pitch, but a rough finish for the Brewers. 36 pitches for Abner, and we were double checking this before we started. So from the 18th through the 20th of May, Uribe pitched in 3 straight. So that was last week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. He got a couple days off after that, and then again last week, Friday, day off, Sunday. Like you're looking at the way that this shakes out. Friday was the day that he then went 1+, almost 2 innings, threw a lot of pitches. So you're looking at the way that the workload has shaken out for him. It's been very heavy. So, trying to count on him for 2 there, that's a pretty big ask, and it didn't end up coming to fruition. That was kind of a theme this week for a couple guys just being asked to maybe not quite push themselves as severely in terms of pitching every day, but guys being out there on like 1 day of rest, maybe 2 days of rest after what was a pretty heavy workload before that, and then being asked to go multiple. The interesting part about this was in postgame, Pat Murphy said that the decision to send Uribe back out was partially because he only threw, in Murphy's estimation, like 12 pitches in that first inning in the ninth. He threw over 20 pitches in the ninth inning. So that's interesting. But again, I mean, it does come down to Freddie's got to give you more length there.
Yeah.
Just kind of a lot of the stuff we've talked about. You're not quite getting enough length from certain guys. And then the issue becomes a little bit worse with the way that the innings have been divided up by the dugout management in the bullpen. So you kind of saw that coming back to bite in this one. Game 3, the Brewers would lose 2-1. Quinn Priester delivered his best start as a Milwaukee Brewer. 6 innings for him, 6 hits, a walk, 7 strikeouts, only 1 earned. Unfortunately, he would have to leave this game after 6 because Pat Murphy said about midway through that game, he started dealing with a blister on one of his pitching fingers, and they decided it'd be best to pull him there. Otherwise, I can go either way on this, but this may have been one of the days where you do try to potentially push him for another inning. You've obviously got the thought of I believe the heart of the order, the top of the order was coming around a fourth time, so that's also something you got to think about as well. But given the state of where things are at with the rest of this staff, it's a debate you can have. But it ended up being kind of ruled out because of that blister concern. For now, sounds like everything's going to be okay for him to make his next start, but we'll see what happens. The only run the Brewers would score in this game was a Caleb Durbin RBI single. Tyler Alexander then allowing that second run for the Pirates in relief. Game 4, another doozy, kind of similar to the back and forth of Game 2. But the Brewers ending up on top in this one, flipping the score, actually. So Game 2 was Pirates 6, Brewers 5. Game 4 was Brewers 6, Pirates 5. Hot start in the first inning, 3 runs for the Brewers, 2 of them scoring on a Sal Frelick single. Logan Henderson, meanwhile, on the bump, 5 innings for him, 5 hits, a couple of walks, 6 Ks, and an earned run. This is the home run that I alluded to earlier from O'Neill Cruz, where he set the StatCast record for the hardest ball hit since 2015, 122.9 miles an hour. And this was a few innings after he uncorked one of the harder throws of the year as well from the outfield. Unfortunately, it was nowhere near the target. Fortunately for the Brewers, though, because that contributed to that 3-run first inning. But you can see the talent on display for him here. Logan Henderson, though, another solid outing for him. And what was impressive about this one is I think he did it without really having the changeup.
Mm-hmm.
We had talked about this before. There's going to be days where he doesn't have both of those 2 best pitches. And he largely just got through the Pirates with fastballs in this one and a couple of changeups that were good enough. And I think you could still see that hitters were, it was in the backs of their minds. And I think that contributed to the success with the fastball as well. But more good stuff from him. We'll get to it after this game. He would end up being optioned to AAA. Pat Murphy had an explanation of what the thinking is there. Nick Mears pitched again, and it did not go well for him in this game. 3 hits, 2 earned runs, only recorded 1 out. Just looking gassed. The workload has been very, very heavy for him, and you could see it in this one. The command has not been amazing for him these last couple of weeks now. The whiffs have disappeared, I think mainly because he's just not executing pitches. The fastball whiffs are completely gone. Yeah. I don't have Savant in front of me. This might have been one of those games, though, where he didn't get a single fastball whiff. I know he didn't get one against Boston either when he would pitch in the series finale of that 3-game set. So Pat Murphy kind of talked a little bit later about trying to let off Nick Mears in particular, but that's not the way that things would end up going. We'll talk about that when we get there. Adam Frazier hit a go-ahead 2-run double off of Jared Koenig, who has also been pretty heavily worked as well. Isaac Collins almost made a really good catch on this ball, and I saw a couple of people saying that they felt he should have made this one because he was so close to getting there. He largely had gotten there, but the amount of ground he had to cover to even get to that point, I don't think people realize how hard of a play that was for him. And Adam Frazier is batting from the left side, so Isaac Collins is shaded towards center field because of the way that they're going to play a guy who's hitting from that side. So he had a lot of ground to cover there. Isaac Collins, if you look at the metrics, has actually graded out really well in left field, especially with the jumps that he gets on balls. So I don't think he's the guy that you can really blame here. Just an unfortunate bloop that was kind of just out of his reach after he had already covered a lot of ground. Caleb Durbin, though, hitting a 2-run double, and Terang hitting an RBI double. Brewers getting the lead right back. And then Abner Uribe and Trevor McGill would take this one home, each of them recording 2 strikeouts out of the bullpen. Like I talked about, Logan Henderson was sent down to AAA before the Brewers began their series with the Red Sox, and that was the move to bring DL Hall back from the 60-day IL. I think partially, even if it's not said out loud, I think this was a little bit of a casualty of, again, the way the bullpen's been used lately and where things stand. They really did need to bring DL Hall back into that mix. Logan Henderson's got options, and you've got Jose Quintana coming back. The Brewers keep saying Brandon Woodruff's very close to coming back. We'll talk about that outing in a little bit. I'm not sure he actually is. And that's just my hunch based on what we've seen with the stuff these last couple times out in the minor leagues for him. But that was the move ahead of the Red Sox series, and DL Hall would make an immediate impact in game 1. Brewers 3, Red Sox 2. Jackson Chourio hitting a first pitch home run off of Garrett Crochet, aggressive with a fastball right down the middle. And I think sometimes when you're facing some of these top tier pitchers, I don't mind swinging at the first pitch against some of these guys, maybe compared to how aggressive Chourio's been overall. A lot of times these guys, they know how to make pitches. So sometimes, especially in these matchups, the best pitch that you are going to get to hit might be a first pitch fastball. And Jackson Chourio didn't miss it from Garrett Crochet, giving the Brewers an early lead. Chad Patrick got the start in this one. Another start, second in a row, where he couldn't complete 5 innings, 4 2/3 for him, 3 hits, 2 walks, 6 Ks. Didn't allow an earned run, but a somewhat quick hook for him. That actually brings us to our first question of the week. Richard asked us via email as the game was going on, actually, so he was right on top of it. Could you explain the thought process behind the 5th inning pull of Patrick in the Memorial Day game against the Sox? He left at 79 pitches and seemed like he could have gotten through 6 strong. I'm sure the answer has something to do with going through the order a third time, but with the bullpen as taxed as it has been and Patrick pitching well, I don't understand why it would be a factor here. So Pat Murphy talked about this a little bit when we were in postgame, and he was kind of going through what the thought was as they were going to be approaching that 5th inning. So they sent Patrick back out. For a little bit of context, he had been doing okay the last couple innings, but he had worked in and out of trouble a little bit early in the game. You had the walks were showing up again for him at times, like they have in some of his outings. So I think that's something you got to think about as well. But as you're going into that 5th inning, you had the bottom 2 hitters in the order, and then Jarren Duran was going to bat in that 5th inning. Pat Murphy said the plan was, in a perfect world, Patrick could have gotten through 5. He gets Duran, the inning's over. But they decided if Duran was going to reach base, they were going to go to Hall, get the lefty matchup with Rafi Devers the 3rd time through. And I think that's the right call, especially when you've got a fresh DL Hall who can give you that length. I've seen a lot of people talk about, with the current bullpen situation, starters having quick hooks with starters not going super deep. You know, as critical as we've been of Pat Murphy and the bench's handling of some pitchers over the last couple weeks, I don't think the quick hooks are an issue. I really don't. That seems to be, and I'm not saying he's complaining here, but that just seems to be something a lot of people are pointing to right now. I still think more of it comes down to they have enough guys in that bullpen to figure it out. I think it's you have the quick hook, and then you're still relying on the same 4 or 5 guys every time you have the quick hook. So, I mean, Chad Patrick as well. This is a guy who is mostly going to throw fastballs. His cutter is basically, he's got 2 different versions of his cutter, but then it's the 4-seamer and the 2-seamer. Doesn't really mix the changeup in there because it's not great. The slider's not great. He just doesn't have a ton of other options. So I think he is by nature a guy who you got to be really careful with the exposure. Like I said, I know he had a couple of solid innings in a row under his belt there, but he had dealt with some traffic earlier in the game. Like to be completely honest, I just don't know that he's quite trustworthy enough where if you have another guy who you can use in that matchup who fares a little bit better, I think it makes sense to go to him there. So I understand why people want to see guys get a chance to go a little bit deeper, especially with the way things are looking right now in that bullpen. But I think the Brewers can win games by being aggressive with some of these starting pitching hooks. I think the issue is still that Murphy doesn't seem to trust every guy in that bullpen like he should. I think that's what the issue is here, because I do think that if you let Chad Patrick go a little deeper, I would not have been shocked if things didn't go great.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination. This is, the starters aren't going super deep, and then, like you said, on top of that, we're going to the same 4, maybe 5 guys pretty much every game that's remotely close. And the Brewers have shown that they are mostly going to play close games at this point in the season. So you have to be willing to, in a close game, go to some of the other guys, go to Tyler Alexander, go to people like that. Like Jack mentioned, in this particular spot, you just brought DL Hall up. He's ready, available, able to go 2 to 3 innings. He ends up going 2 1/3 in this one, but you also have a pretty good matchup for him. Well, not a good matchup for anybody, but you would rather, in a vacuum, have DL Hall facing Rafi Devers than have Chad Patrick facing Rafi Devers with a guy on second. And we talk about it with the bullpen and everything. You can't manage the entire game to say, like, okay, we're just going to go and not allow a run, because that's kind of what he's doing at times, is like Murph is so focused on, we just can't ever give up runs that we have to run the leverage guy out there no matter what, because it's a close game. You can't manage like that. But I think in this spot, like you said, third time through, I think the first batter we saw Patrick face the third time through, and Duran hit a double. And I don't think that that's a coincidence. I don't think that's something that is that shocking. I think it is going to be something that he deals with if he goes deeper into games. And obviously the big difference here is that if the Brewers were scoring more runs, if it was 5-0 in that moment, they would have probably left Patrick in and said, hey, let's see if we can get through 6 because the bullpen is tired or whatever. Like, those are the moments where I agree. Like, I agree whenever we talk, or anybody talks about it. Like, if the offense was better, none of this would matter. It would be a lot easier to manage it. There's no question about that. I think we have to realize that the offense isn't better. It's not good. So you have to manage with the offense that you have. And in this spot, you have a guy who could basically piggyback the start, and they ended up getting total 7 innings before going to their true bullpen. It sounds like that's kind of the plan for DL Hall now that he's up. Not necessarily, again, it's not a piggyback start per se, but it's kind of similar. Like, you are planning on him helping some of these guys that you don't want seeing the order 3 times and getting you through another time, maybe even twice. You might get through 4 times through the order before you even have to go to the bullpen. And that kind of seems like the plan here. Hall obviously did a good job in this game as well, but I think more than anything, it was his availability that made it possible, and also, in my mind, made it the correct move in this moment. I think there are, again, moments where maybe you would say, if Priester doesn't have the blister, like, yeah, I probably would have, in his start in Pittsburgh, it was 7-8-9 coming up that inning. I would have said, similar to what they did here, if you can go give us a 1-2-3 inning, it's your inning. Like, go out there. But we're not, O'Neill Cruz is not seeing Quinn Priester a 4th time. And that's where I would have gone to the pen when that happens. So, like, I think there's wiggle room to maybe extend some of these guys a little bit in this scenario. I think it was the right time to do it with everything that we have to our knowledge, that we had a guy who could give you multiple, who they were planning to throw for multiple, and you had a better matchup at the plate by doing that at that time. So I get it. I certainly would prefer our starters to be able to go 6 innings. Like, that would make things a lot easier. A lot of what we've talked about would not be as complicated as it is right now. But for a lot of these guys, that's just not the best for them. And it's probably not the best for the team. I think the only thing you could say, and we haven't really seen this, the few times we have seen it, actually, Murph has done this. If the Brewers are down by a lot, I would like for him to kind of leave a starter out and hang him out to dry a little bit. Let him get to 100 pitches no matter what. He did that with Priester in that Cubs game. There haven't been a ton of them, but, like, other than opening week with the Yankees, which, I mean, you're not really planning for anything like that ever. He has let the games that are getting out of hand get out of hand. There hasn't really been too many where he's been forcing anything with that. So I think generally he's doing a good job with the length of the starters. Like Jack mentioned with everything else, I think you can make it work. It's just a matter of trusting all 8 guys in the pen to be able to make it work. So no problem with it. Obviously, in an ideal world, yeah, you would love to have starters go deeper.
Yeah, I think this. I had no issues with how. I mean, this is how we've been kind of getting on the Brewers and getting on Murphy, saying, this is how you need to start playing it. And they did it in this game. You were able to pull Patrick a little sooner. You had your length guy,
Mm-hmm.
and you used him for length, which is what he's there for. DL Hall was there for this exact situation, and they took advantage of it. 2 1/3 innings for him. I don't think he was great, to be honest with you. 2 hits, 2 walks, 1 strikeout. I know only 1 run, but he kind of battled traffic. The swing and miss wasn't really there. Like, it was not a particularly sharp outing, I don't think, even if he ended up being a bridge lengthwise, but it's also only his first outing back. Hopefully you can kind of get a little bit better from him. He broke out that cutter that he's been working on a couple times in this season debut. I talked to him on Wednesday morning about kind of how that originated. He said he was basically just playing around in the bullpen before his last rehab outing, and he's a guy who has a supination bias, so his wrist and his hand as he's releasing the ball naturally get more to the outside of the ball instead of the inside of the ball for like you would if you're pronating like a changeup. So that's something that tends to lend itself well to being able to throw a cut fastball. So he kind of started messing around with it. He took it into the game, and he said, we've talked about this a little bit before. We talked over the winter. Like, he may need to add another fastball variant to protect against a four-seamer that was scouted as a plus pitch, but has actually been a well below average pitch for the duration of his time with the Brewers. And, that's what he said to me. He said, look, the velo on my fastball still is not where it used to be. So if I have something else that's hard with a little bit of a different movement profile, I can use that to protect my fastball, my main fastball a little bit. And I like the characteristics of this
Mm-hmm.
pitch. He holds velo on it really well, actually. If he's sitting like 90, 92 to 95 with the four seamer, and then the few cutters he's thrown have averaged like 91. So
Mm-hmm.
he holds the velo on it. It's not the vertiest cutter in the world, but I think it's something that's going to help out his arsenal quite a bit. So we'll see if he starts to work it in a little bit more. My guess is that he's going to have to, because again, I mean, we saw it right away. The first outing back, his fastball, it's still not a good fastball. It's not as bad as it was last year, but
Yep.
still, I mean, it was sitting again. I think it averaged like a little under 93. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but like the velo wasn't amazing. He flashed more vert during the rehab assignment, but it was down to like 14 and a half of induced vert when he pitched on Memorial Day. Like, it's still not a good pitch. So he's going to need the rest of that arsenal, because now, instead of being able to just blow guys away with that fastball like the Brewers are hoping, I think he's actually going to have to find ways to work around it, because, there's a case you can make that it's quite possibly the worst pitch in his arsenal instead of his best one. And that's still kind of where it sits. But the first outing for him, again, I don't think he pitched great, but with the results, he was able to contribute something. And like you alluded to, Pat Murphy talked before and after this game about how they're going to try to use DL Hall and Aaron Ashby as leverage long relievers, is what he said. So guys who can give you multiple innings out of the pen and be a bridge or cover some innings when the rest of the pen is not in great shape, and you trust them enough to pitch them when it's a close game, when you're leading by a little bit, or if you're down by a little bit, whatever. And like we've been saying, like, this is what you need to do. You have guys who are capable of that. This is how you can keep the rest of that bullpen fresh without having to extend starters longer than you're comfortable with. It's the best way to kind of balance everything out. So hopefully it's something that the Brewers stick with, because Ashby would also get a chance to pitch in kind of that role the following day. But just to wrap up the action in game one, we got a little sidetrack there. Andrew Monasterio and Eric Haas driving in runs in this one. And then Trevor McGill worked really, really hard in the ninth to get the save. He threw 34 pitches, stranded the bases loaded, did allow 1 run, but the Brewers hanging on by a thread. Trevor McGill seemed pretty tired after this one, and I can't say I blame him. He left it all out there on the mound. And there was a part of me that as I was watching this outing, I was getting a little bit concerned because just a lot of high stress pitches. The Brewers are out of mound visits in that ninth inning, so they couldn't do anything to really pause the game a little bit and just give him a little more time to catch his breath. And his velo was up a lot. He was like sitting 100 in this outing, which is not for most of the year. Actually, he's been down a tick from where he's usually been in the past. And sometimes when you see like high stress outing, the velo's up. It's not always the case, but sometimes that can be a precursor to like the elbow's been overworked and something may be about to blow there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think people don't realize that. It is actually very common for there to be a velo jump in a positive direction right before the elbow gives out. So I always have that moment when I'm watching games too, and all of a sudden the guy's throwing harder than I'm used to seeing, and consistently for that matter. And it's like, this could be good. This could also be going in a bad direction here. So when you said that, I was like, yeah, I had that same thought when you texted me that. I was like, I kind of thought the same thing. I will say McGill had some very nice like veteran moves to buy himself a little bit of time. He, after the 1 run scored, he tied his shoe next to the catcher after backing up or he was over by the plate. I don't remember exactly how the run scored, but he was over by the plate and he tied his shoe and took his time doing that, and then got the baseball, and then he threw that ball out and asked for a new ball. So like he's a vet. He knew how to buy a little bit of time, a little bit of rest for himself, which was good to see, because I do think a younger player may not think of that and may just think that he has to get back on the mound and just rush himself. And like, I don't know about this year, but I think that's absolutely something we could have seen from Abner Uribe in the past. Like, things just kind of spiral on him. You don't have a mound visit to go calm him down. Like, I could see things getting out of hand quickly with that type of situation. So in this case, it was really nice to have McGill out there and for him to be able to kind of find a way to manufacture a little bit of rest for himself. But yeah, this was a very long appearance, and he'd been used quite a bit over the last few days, and before that as well. We mentioned the Pirates series. He came in after that rain delay and finished that game after Carlos Rodriguez was unable to, and then he also pitched in the it was a game. Yeah, he pitched in game 4.
Yep.
In the finale,
so
So
back for him.
Back to back, and yeah, he'd been used quite a bit, as a lot of relievers had been. And 34 pitches for him is not something he is very used to. You don't see that very often. That's not even. He was never more than a 1 inning guy very often before he became the closer for half a season last year. But I can't imagine he's been over 30 too often in the last couple of years with the Brewers. So he was really getting up there. Like Jack talked about, like I mentioned, like there's no way to kind of really buy him any rest. There's no time to even go out there and give him any cues or anything on, like, he walked 3 guys that inning. Like you couldn't even go out there and try and help him at all. It was basically just he had to go and find a way to figure it out. So it was good to see him do that. You certainly will take the win. But yeah, after that game, of all the bullpen decisions we've talked about, if they would have pitched him again in this series, I think that probably would have been the thing that set me off more than anything, because he needed to sit the next 2 days, and he did. But now he will have 3 days off in a row with the off day on Thursday, and I think that is hopefully a little bit of a reset for him. I think that will help him quite a bit, and he definitely needed it. Like you said, in his availability, he said something along. He said, I threw over 30 pitches, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to be sore tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So he wasn't totally aware of it in the moment, but yeah, he definitely was feeling it game 2. And I'm sure even today on Wednesday as well. So good job to bear down and get it done under some not great circumstances, but it was a tough one to watch. That one was one of the more, like, I had a bad feeling the entire inning type of situations, and he ended up squeaking it out and getting it done. So it was, I guess, in that way, it was good to see.
Just one final note on that outing. So 3 walks. One of them was intentional, though. They intentionally walked Rafi Devers, and that was what loaded the bases actually for Connor Wong, but he got him to fly out.
A good decision.
Yes. Game 2, the Brewers taking this one by a final of 5-1. Aaron Savali, 5+ for him. In his second start off the IL, just 1 run, scattered 3 hits, walked 1, struck out 4. A lot of fastballs again for him. A lot of four-seamers at the top of the zone for him. That's something he doesn't always show as much. The pitch shapes across the board are a little bit different for him this year. The cutter's more of like a cut ride now. He's added a little bit more arm side to the four-seamer, so it's not really like a cutty four-seamer anymore. Just interesting stuff. It almost seems like he did something over the offseason where he kind of rebuilt a lot of his arsenal, not necessarily the pitches he throws, but how they all play. He's a very cerebral guy, a very big feel for pitching kind of guy. So just kind of interesting to see that. Like I talked about, Aaron Ashby would get an opportunity to follow him as the game went along and provide a little bit of length. He would, however, throw a wild pitch after entering in the 6th inning that allowed that run to score. Ashby didn't, or Savali didn't give up a run when he was on the mound, but that run was charged to him. Ashby's line looks okay, but again, he was quite wild in this one. Oh, yeah. His second outing off the IL. He looked really good in Pittsburgh and then really wild in this one. So kind of what we've seen before from Aaron Ashby, but hopefully he can be a contributor for the Brewers. The stuff looks really, really good right now from him in these first 2 outings.
Yeah, the stuff looks nasty. I mean, we've talked about it before before we were doing the podcast or anything, when he was healthy pre-injury, when he had just got that extension, like you and I both thought he could potentially be one of the better lefty starters in baseball with the type of stuff that he has. Like it is nasty, nasty stuff. And there's 4 legitimate pitches that he can throw. But if he doesn't know where they're going, then that can obviously be an issue. And it's part of the reason, even beyond the injury, that starting was probably going to be difficult for him, especially after the injury. But yeah, this one, the line, like you said, I was actually reading the line afterwards and I was like, oh, that's not that bad. It felt like he probably had like 2 or 3 walks. I think he only had 1. I think it was a 4-pitch walk, if I remember correctly, but he basically lost command for like 6 pitches. And when that happens, you remember that because it was such a bad stretch. I think he was fine after that for the most part. He did get a lot of chase on breaking balls that I don't know if he'd always get chase on. There were some that were, I mean, it's a really good pitch, don't get me wrong, but when it bounces like on or in front of the plate, you don't often get a ton of swings on those, and he was getting some of that. So he may have been bailed out a little bit by the Red Sox, but even on the wild pitch, I don't want to blame Contreras. I think that was actually more just his finger issue that ended up causing that ball popping out of his glove. Like that went right into the middle of his glove. It wasn't a good pitch. It was nowhere near where he was set up. But it was a little interesting to me. I thought they might rule it a passed ball when they looked at it. It would probably be a little tough of a ruling on Contreras, but it went directly into his mitt. Like there wasn't, I don't know. It was a weird play. And I did see on the replay too, Contreras looked like he thought it was going to hit the batter, and he turned his head away from the play, and I think that may have contributed a little bit too. So overall, I would say both of them probably contributed to that, but Ashby did launch the next pitch to the backstop too, so there's a decent chance it would have scored it anyway. But overall, I mean, the stuff looks great. Like you said, I think we saw it at the end of last year when he came up that he can, in a role like this, be very effective and very helpful. And the nice part about him in particular is that he can be that guy who gives you 2 or 3 one night, but he can also be that guy that if you need a big strikeout or something like that, like he's capable of coming in and being that type of leverage 1-inning guy too, which I think there's even more value there in him being able to do both those things. So he could be a pretty nice weapon coming out of the pen for the Brewers moving forward.
The 5 runs from Milwaukee is kind of funny to look at because heading into the 9th, they were trailing 1-0 and they were staring down another shutout. Aroldis Chapman comes into the game and they were able to tie it against him. Christian Yelich with a little defense hack, excuse me, double down the left field line. He said post-game that's kind of just all you can do sometimes against a lefty who's throwing 102 miles an hour with a lot of run that's coming in on you. Just try to stick the bat in there and do something with it. And he was able to tuck one down the line. Sal Frelick driving him in. Sal Frelick actually smoked one right back up the middle. That was actually a very impressive piece of hitting in that matchup for him. Grant Anderson then and Rob Zastryzny putting in some big work in extra innings. Rob Z warmed up twice in this game, did not come in. Warmed up, I lost count of how many times in Pittsburgh and did not come in. Warms up a third time, finally gets a chance to come in, and he's got to face Robbie Devers with the Manfred man in scoring position.
Yeah.
In a tie
And
game
Duran.
extras.
Duran and then Devers.
Devers was the big one, though, because that's the one that you always circle. Duran hasn't quite
yeah.
been as spectacular as he was
No.
last year. But still, Rob Z came in and basically just chucked a bunch of fastballs, and you could tell they weren't picking it up very well. He's, I did the feature on him when he first got called up by the Brewers last year, and, he was really effective, but the injury wiped out the rest of his season, and we didn't see him again. But from the moment they signed him to that minor league deal, like, just looking at this stuff, I was always like, this is a big league caliber reliever. Like, it's a deceptive mix. He's been around for a while. He now knows exactly how everything plays, the best way to use it, how to sequence all of his stuff. And there's a reason, I think we talked about it, a couple of weeks ago. There's a reason why the Brewers chose to reacquire this guy. He's out of options, so they can't send him down. I'm sure they think that he's a quality big league reliever and he can get some big outs for them, and he did it here.
Yeah. I mean, there's no question about it. He's probably thrown a total of like 15 or 16 innings now between the two seasons with the Brewers, but they've gone very well, and it doesn't feel like it's been luck. Like, when you watch it, it's not like he's getting lineouts and all these, just like, he's getting bad, uncomfortable swings against his stuff. And like you said, it's a mix of a bunch of different types of fastballs and just going at guys from a bit of a weird angle, especially for lefty hitters. But even, I don't think he's going to be a guy who has like awful platoon splits either. I think he can get righties out. I think this is a guy who can just, in today's day and age with the 3 batter limit, you have to be able to, but I don't think he's a guy that would need to be, or even in the past would have been somebody that was like, yeah, we're bringing him in to face lefties, but that's it. It's not Alex Claudio or something like that. Like, we're not talking about that type of guy. This is a guy who can get outs against good hitters. And like you said, he warmed up quite a few times in Pittsburgh, wasn't used much. Twice in this game, which normally when you get hot twice, that's basically like going into the game and they consider you done. I think Murph had said they asked him, if I recall, right, like if he'd be good to do this, and he said yes. But just generally, I mean, that's impressive too, to get hot 3 times, go in on the third one, and then face the top of the Red Sox order. Tough situation, guy on third, 1 out, and get a strikeout and a pretty routine fly ball to left. Like, really, really good work from Rob Zastryzny. And yeah, as long as he's healthy, I expect him to be in the Brewers bullpen. I think he's going to help a lot this year.
I think with the platoon thing too, like, that's where having that cutter now helps him. Like, he's comfortable pitching righties up and in with that cutter that's boring in on them. And he can get some uncomfortable swings that way. But yeah, he knows how to use his stuff. He's comfortable with it. He's been around a while. Everything's been kind of fine-tuned to a good spot where the mix comes together nicely. His stuff grades, if you look at like his stuff pro grades on Baseball Prospectus, almost the entire arsenal grades out either above average or really good. So I don't think this is going to be the last time we see him getting a couple of big outs. Christian Yelich then coming up against Liam Hendricks in the bottom of the 10th. And it really didn't have to do much because the bases were loaded, but instead he hit a walk-off grand slam for the first walk-off home run of his career, and the Brewers won 5-1. It's been a really rough go for Christian Yelich. The roughest start he's had to a season. This has been one of his rough. I think statistically it has been like the roughest 2-month almost stretch of his career. But good to see the power come back a little bit. And I mean, we talked about it a couple weeks ago. Like, it's timing for him. Like, if anything, it was always encouraging that he was still hitting some home runs along the way, because that meant that the power was still there and the ability to move was still there. That was always going to be the chief concern coming off of back surgery. And it seems like that timing is starting to improve a little bit based on
Yeah.
some of the swings that we saw.
Yeah. I mean, even going back to, I think it was the fourth game. Yeah, it was the fourth game in the Pirates series. It was a lefty starter, and then he faced, I think he only faced lefties in that game, if I remember right. And he just had a bunch of good swings against them. And we talked about it before. Like, that's been one of his biggest issues. And yes, the double off of Chapman was pretty cheap, but even still, hanging in against a guy like that and getting a hit, like, at least in terms of confidence, that has to help things a little bit for a guy like that. And today he faced Chapman again, right? And singled and hit Chapman. Again,
Mhm.
not like the most impressive hit in the world, but still, we've been seeing huge whiff issues for him against lefties. This is one of the toughest lefties in baseball, and twice put the ball in play with a little behind it, at least on one of them, and then pretty decently off of him today for the single. Like, it's good to see. I think it is one starting to see the ball a little bit better against lefties. I'm sure that's played a part in it, but that's allowing him to get some of the timing down. And against righties, he had been fine. I think he still obviously would like to be better. And we've seen 3 homers now in this stretch that we're talking about, and a lot of hard hit balls, and including some hard hit outs too. So, like, I think he was 9 for 21 coming into today, including the Pittsburgh series. Um, and there were at least 3 or 4 balls that were kind of scalded. Obviously, there's also a couple cheap ones mixed in, so they kind of even out. But still, I think this is the best he's looked these last 2 series for sure. Just, we've seen like a game or two where he's looked good and he's had good swings. This is a little bit longer. This is about a week now of pretty good swings just generally. And like we said, and like Jack just said, it just feels like when he finds the timing completely, I expect him to just still be a good hitter. I don't think this is going to be a case where Christian Yelich is not a good hitter. I would be shocked. Just a funny note though, because somebody was mentioning that he's like almost on pace for a 30-30 season right now, despite everything else, which I don't. It's a crazy stat to think about when you look at everything else. But I was like, I wonder what the worst OPS is ever for a 30-30 season. And it's like 785 from Joe Carter in the 80s. And Yelich is almost on pace for it, just slightly off because they've played a little over a third of a season and he's at 10-10. But he's at a 680 OPS or something right now. So that would be an incredible feat to somehow do that with the current OPS he has. He won't. He might get to 30-30. I'm not ruling that out, but he will not have a 680 OPS if he does it. But it was just a funny little thing to project out when I was looking at it, because I was curious on that, and I figured it wasn't going to be anywhere near 700, but there were only 2 under 800, so that was a little surprising to me. But yeah, either way, I just feel like he's starting to look a lot more like the guy we've seen when he's performing like we know he can.
Not 30-30, but that immediately took my mind to Eugenio Suarez with the Reds a couple of years ago, his last season in Cincinnati. Again, not a 30-30 season because he's slow and never steals, but 31 home runs that year with a 82 OPS plus,
Yeah.
negative
Yep.
0.5 WAR according to Baseball Reference. But then he bounced back with Seattle, and he's been quite solid again ever since.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, funny to kind of think of some statistical oddities, whether it be recent or not. Game 3, the Brewers again pulling off an extra inning win, and this is how they would lock down their first winning sweep of 2025. It took until the end of May, but they made it happen. More of the same from Freddie Peralta. He was able to get through 5 this time. It took him 108 pitches, 3 runs for him, 6 hits, 3 walks, 6 strikeouts. The stuff was good. Like when he was in the strike zone, they were not hitting him very well. It changed a little bit as we kind of started getting a little deeper into the game, and they'd seen him a couple times. Those last couple innings, you started to see a lot more. There was more hard contacts against him, but like the whiffs were there when he was in the strike zone. Problem is he wasn't in the strike zone very often, including with the fastball. A lot of today, there were a lot of really bad misses.
Yeah.
And it was not just the fastball, but like he did not have the breaking stuff. I looked at his pitch plot, and I think I could maybe count like 3 competitive breaking pitches the entire day. Otherwise, everything was either nowhere close to the plate, like not even starting in the strike zone to where you're not going to get a chase. And then I think he threw a couple curveballs that were like right down the middle.
Yeah. Yeah, it was not good.
Not the greatest day for him. But I do think there was some significance to sending him back out for that 5th inning.
yeah.
And I know the pitch count was high, but I think that was the right call. I saw some people who were a little wary of it because that pitch count's getting up there. But I mean, if there's a guy to push it with and send him back out there, and he's gonna want to go out there too, but send him back out there and say, hey, you're our guy. Figure it out. You got to get us 3 more outs here because we need it. Freddie's the guy. He's the longest tenured member of this rotation. He's durable. This is a guy who has started 30 plus games multiple years in a row. So I'm just not especially worried about pushing it a little bit with him because it's not like he hasn't had relative to a lot of pitchers nowadays, a heavier workload than some other guys. Like he can do it. So I think it was the right, no matter what the outcome was, I think it was the right call to send him back out and say, hey man, you just, if you're good, you got to gut out 1 more inning for us. And he did that. It ended up being like his most efficient inning of the day to cap it off. So not a good outing for him. It's got to be better than this, but that was just something that stood out to me, like pushing him through that 5th inning and the fact that he was able to do it.
Yeah, and I heard his availability after the game too, and he kind of talked about how, he's not happy with the start, but he is kind of proud of himself and happy that he was able to go out there and give them that inning and also just continue to at least keep the team in the game while things weren't going very well, while he was throwing a lot of balls. Well, he just wasn't very competitive, like you said. I mean, that this was kind of the most like what we saw last year. Really, it has been the last 2 starts. I mean, just the misses are bad and they're not competitive. They're not in spots that are going to get chase or swing and miss. It's kind of middle or spraying it all over the place. And that's not usually going to work very well. And obviously the line says it wasn't very good today, but I do think, like you said, it's very important for a guy to be able to do this in his situation. This is the guy that, again, it's the ace. It's the guy that we've talked about needing him to step up and do things that aces do. And sometimes that is the job. Sometimes it is that you're the guy who's built up the most. You're the guy who's most capable of seeing an order a 3rd time, even if your stuff's not the best today, even if you don't have the command you normally have. We need you to fight and give us 5 innings here. And you didn't do it last time, especially. Like, we need you to go get it done this time. And like you said, his last inning was probably his best inning, or arguably his best inning. And it's not again, I don't want to say this is a great start from Freddie, but he made something out of nothing here and made it serviceable, which, again, that over the course of a 30-some start season, if you're healthy, you need to do that sometimes. And it was good to see him do it and not allow it to become like a huge blowout and just never find the command and never be able to figure things out. Like he did a good job at least giving them a chance. And sometimes that's what you got to do.
Yeah. So good on, Pat Murphy and the guys on the bench for deciding, hey, we got to send him back out. Good on Freddie for wanting to do it and then being able to do it as well.
Yeah.
So kind of a silver lining of sorts that you can take from what was otherwise, in the grand scheme of things, a bad outing.
Yes.
There's at least there's something that he showed you there that you can kind of take forward. On the offensive side, Jake Bauers hit a solo homer. He got a start today on Wednesday. Caleb Durbin, though, was largely the story of this one. Sal Frelick was too. I know we don't have him in the notes, but he had a 4-hit day.
Yeah.
And big moment for him in extras as well, beating out a ground ball hit to first base.
Yeah.
So just kind of a very Sal Frelick game. He also tagged up and went from first to second as well on a warning track fly ball earlier in the game, which contributed to the run scoring earlier in the game when Durbin hit his first double, and that drove in a couple runs because you were able to get Sal Frelick to second base. Would have been a little bit iffier if he had been on first when that double hits. I didn't look at the play super closely. Maybe he still scores, but you've also got 1 out at that point. I don't know if they send him. It made it a much cleaner opportunity to score there, the fact that he was able to take that extra base. But 2 doubles for Durbin, and then he hit a walk-off sac fly. we've talked a lot about how Caleb Durbin hitting, 87-mile-an-hour fly balls is just about the worst kind of contact you can make. I did double check it. He hit that sac fly at 94, so quite a bit harder. But ironically, like that's the one moment where the kind of contact that Caleb Durbin had been making that had been nearly useless, that's actually like the kind of contact
Yep.
that you would absolutely take in that situation. That's the one situation where you would absolutely, 100% of the time be okay with that. And it worked out. But the two doubles that he hit, first one was, so it goes down in the tracking as a ground ball, but like it's one of those really, I would describe it more like a really low line drive, like a
Yeah.
one hop shot. So in my book, it's still kind of a line drive double, which would mean two line drive doubles that he pulled down the left field line. And we've talked about, like, from the moment the Brewers acquired him, if it's going to work, and I'm still not super optimistic that it will. I don't think this game really changes anything for me in terms of how I project him or any of that. But if it is going to work, that's how it needs to happen. That's the kind of contact that got him results in the minor leagues. He's pulling a line drive down that left field line, getting the pull side power that way. And I asked him about a post game. He said, yeah, that's where a lot of my production has come from when I'm at my best. So he feels like his approach is in a good spot. We'll see what happens from here on out, because I still have, the same questions about, is the swing going to play? Is the lack of hard contact going to play? I don't know. But if you're the Brewers, you obviously are not going to be disappointed by any signs of progress you might see in a couple of swings. And the results for him the last week have actually been pretty solid.
I was gonna
I
say,
was
ever
I
since
was
you wrote
looking,
your
yeah,
article.
right, yeah. So I guess that's the spark for guys, I guess. So we talked about really the two bullpen decisions we've hit on so far in this episode are, number one, Trevor McGill pitching in game one of that Pirates series when I think you could have gotten away without using him. That one's not egregious to me, but I would have gone a different way in light of where things stood with the bullpen. The second one being Abner Uribe getting to work a second inning as that Pittsburgh series went along. And then we get to this one here in game three. So look, with the way the workload had been for the rest of the bullpen, and then Freddie not going deep, like, Nick Mears was probably, unfortunately, going to have to pitch an inning in this game, even if you'd prefer to keep him down, which I think would have been the best case scenario. He's just down. He gets 2 days off normally. Then you have the team off date. Then things can kind of feel a little more reset for him. But he was probably going to have to pitch one with the way the game situation was transpiring. And then Pat Murphy and the Brewers brought him in immediately after Peralta for the sixth, with the team trailing by one at that point, and then they asked him to go 2 innings. The second inning coming after the Brewers took the lead in the second. The first inning was efficient. He went 3 up, 3 down. He came back out for the second, gave up a game-tying home run to Wilyer Abreu, tying the game at 4, and that fastball was down to 93 miles an hour that he gave up the home run on. And Pat Murphy had said the day before, he had suggested that they were planning to try to ease off of this a little bit. And then they asked him for 2 innings the next day. Again, I get it. Like, he was probably going to have to pitch one.
Mm-hmm.
But the way I'm looking at this situation is, you're down by 1. The start wasn't super long. Hall's not good to go because he went long and 1 day off. Ashby, got to stay away from him too because he pitched the night before.
Mm-hmm.
That leaves Tyler Alexander as your long guy that you have left in the pen. You're down. Throw him out there when you're down 1, and hopefully he eats 2 innings. Maybe he can even eat a third, depending on how things go. But I would have preferred to just you go with him first, see how far he can get you, and then if Nick Mears has to pitch to get you home, he has to pitch. But it gives you a way to try to avoid having to once again get more out of him than you should be trying to get out of him. What was interesting about this, though, is we got down to postgame, and Pat Murphy was asked about going to Nick Mears for 2 innings, especially with the way the workload's been for him, what he said about Nick Mears and the way that they wanted to maybe back off of his usage a little bit. Here's the portion of the quote that I posted. Basically, Murphy made it sound like they decided before the game that Mears was the guy who could go 2 innings. And it also sounded like they decided that he was going to pitch whether they had the lead or not. So he said, we sit down before every game. By we, he means like himself, Ricky Weeks, the associate manager, and then the pitching coaches, Jim Henderson, Chris Hook, those guys. We sit down before every game and we map out what we would like to have happen. If we're winning, this is what we have to do. Even if we're losing or we're down 1, this is how we have to do it today. And that's exactly how we mapped it out. So like I said, I posted this quote. There were a couple people who read it and they were wondering if Murphy was actually saying that they had a plan for when they were winning and a plan for if they were losing. And I think it's like the even if we're losing phrase. The more I kind of looked at this, I could see how some people would read it like he's saying, even if we're losing, we have a plan. Like he was saying it like that. But I was in the room and the way he said it, like that interpretation never really crossed my mind. Like the way you hear the way he says it, like the way he said it, it sounded like if we're winning, this is what we have to do. And then even if we're losing, like it's still going to be like, this is the way we had to play it today. Like using Mears down 1, asking multiple out of him. And I think he might have gone multiple, even if they didn't take the lead, because there was never at any point in that bottom of the 6th inning where anybody started throwing in that bullpen. Like nobody, I couldn't tell who was, somebody was down there doing J-bands for a little bit, but nobody seemed particularly close to getting ready. Mears had a quick inning. Like, I think they were going to ask him for 2, even if they were still down by 1. And that's, again, like the guy clearly needs a break. Like these guys are always going to say like, nope, I'm up for it. Whatever they need me to do, I'm going to do it, that's the answer you want guys to give. That means they're competitors. That means they're going to give you 110%, which is what you want out of every player. But the reality is if you watch Nick Mears pitch within the last 2 weeks, the whiffs have dried up. He is not getting any swing and miss anymore. Yeah. The command is not good. He's getting hit. We're seeing the velo drop a little bit now, too, like getting down to 93 on that home run that Abreu hit. He is very clearly not in a great spot right now. You need, I think, just try everything you can to back off of this guy. So then to apparently have sat down and said, no, I think we can use him for 2 today. I mean, this is the decision of the week where I really have a hard time understanding why this was seen as a good idea. Again, I can understand like if he needed to pitch, if you look at like the recent workload for that bullpen, Nick Mears was technically one of their most rested relievers going into this game in the like relative to some other guys.
Yeah.
But man, I really think there was a way to like you get 1 out of him if you absolutely have to cover like 1 more inning or something. But and the other part of this Murphy quote that's like a little alarming too is like we've talked about, obviously we're not inside his head, but it seems like he seems to treat like the 1-run deficit as this is high leverage, winnable game. It's right there. It's right in front of us. We got to use the leverage guys when we're down 1 in the middle of the game. So then to hear like the part of the quote, if we're winning, this is what we have to do. Even if we're losing or we're down 1, this is how we have to do it today. Like, again, the way I heard it, that sounds to me like he's saying, yeah, like sometimes we think down 1 is leverage. Like we gotta hit the gas pedal even in that situation. And if that's what he's saying, that's concerning because that's just, again, not a sustainable way to manage your bullpen. And like, I get it. Today's a little bit different. I think, like I said, Mears may have had to pitch down, 1 or 2 runs anyway. But again, like, I would be doing everything I can to avoid it getting to that point as best I could. Because again, you had Tyler Alexander available for length. And by using things the way you did, Alexander ended up having to pitch in leverage in extra innings anyway before the Brewers walked it off. And he actually did a pretty good job. That was one of the better outings he's had in a while. But like that's another thing too. Alexander's down there for length, and it feels like Murphy uses him almost more like a situational mid-leverage lefty sometimes instead of someone who can eat up a couple of innings for you. He's had some multiple inning relief outings, but not as many as I think we were expecting to see with the role that he was seemingly signed to fill.
Yeah, I mean, he was a quasi starter to start the year because of the injuries and everything else. Like, he wasn't really going deep into games, but he clearly is able to give you a little bit of length. And yeah, I think the main thing for me, and it comes back to, if Freddie had a short start, which he did, to me, the plan should have been, regardless of score, regardless of situation, Tyler Alexander comes in if we need to eat some innings here. Like, if we need somebody who's going to follow up Freddie, follow up the starter, and buy 2 or maybe even 3, like you said, it should be Alexander. He is the one down there for length. He's the one who's been going multiple innings at times. Obviously, he's about a month removed from any of the starts, if not even a little longer. But he has still had a couple 2-inning outings and everything else. Like you said, he's the guy who's used to doing that. Nick Mears is not used to doing that. And we already talked about everything else going on with Nick Mears, with his usage and everything beyond that. Like, there's a lot of things that point to Nick Mears making 0 sense for that role and Tyler Alexander making a lot of sense for that role. So the fact that not just Murph, but really the coaching staff that's involved with those decisions seems to have mapped it out that way, that is concerning to me. I don't agree with that process at all. I don't think that's the right way to do it. And funny enough, I saw a lot of people who were mad at the actual decision to pitch Alexander in the 10th inning. They didn't have a choice at that point. They had nobody else that was really available in the bullpen. And like Jack said, I actually thought he did well. He gave up a little ground ball single to allow the runner to get to third. And then he got a double play ball, unfortunately, against one of the fastest people in baseball. So it turned out to not be a double play. Then he picked off David Hamilton, and Bowers made a bad throw to second. And he ended up still limiting it to only that 1 run, which was unearned because it's the Manfred man. I thought he did fine. And it also pointed to why I guess the other part of this, and I can loop it in here, is he's a better guy. You want him in there with a clean slate because he is not a big strikeout guy. He's not a big, you want to use him where he's going to be able to potentially give up a leadoff single like he did in extra innings, but then he might get that ground ball for a double play or something like that, because you don't really want him starting in that leverage spot. And it kind of happened with Zastryzny too. He did a great job, obviously, but it seemed like Murph was trying to avoid using him in a big spot throughout the course of the end of that game in regulation, to the point that he was kind of the only option that they had in extra innings. And both of them did a good job in extra innings. Both of them did. Zastryzny gets more credit because nobody scored. And obviously I get that, but Alexander did his job and he did it well. In the end, though, the process and the thing that Jack talked about that I agree with the most is that you ended up using, we should mention, Uribe and Koenig as well, who I was definitely hoping to avoid both of them pitching. All 3 of those, Mears, Uribe, and Koenig pitching would have been a nice thing to avoid. I get it. Like you said, Mears was almost certainly going to have to. And then there was a chance one of those 2 was going to have to. But all 3 of them, I don't really think you were going to need if you had handled this the way we're talking about. And yes, there is a possibility Alexander goes in there and he gives up a couple of runs and the Brewers don't win this game. That is possible. There's no denying that. Especially he could have gone, they could have tried to push for 3 innings or something, and then he gets in trouble and the Brewers end up losing this game. And no, we don't want the Brewers to lose games. Nobody does. But you also can't push everything, all your chips in to win one game in a series that you already won. You're playing solid baseball right now. You don't want the players to think that you're not going after it. I understand that. The players should be going after every game as hard as they can. But Tyler Alexander pitching 2 innings is not some guarantee that things are going to go poorly. I feel like sometimes that's how people view this when these decisions, when we talk about them, yeah, but it worked. And Mears he gave up the 1 run, but Alexander might have given up 2. I mean, he's got a 5 ERA. He might have. He also very well could have just gone out and given you the exact same thing that a combination of Mears and Uribe gave you, which was 3 innings of 1 earned run. Like that wouldn't have been a shocking outcome to a Tyler Alexander outing, or 2 innings with 1 earned run, which is what you got out of Mears. And then you might have been able to just avoid having to use all 3 of those guys. And I think that's the main point here, is that you could have put Alexander in, and maybe it doesn't work, but I would rather see if he goes out there and can give you 2 or 3 innings, you might save even 2 of those arms that they ended up having to use in the end. And over the course of a season, sometimes you just have to make that trade-off in a game. I think it's not punting. People love using that word because I think it got popular when Craig was here and he would go, yeah, we're down by 4. I'm just not we're not making an effort with the bullpen, or even 2 or 3. Like that was punting. That was different. This is not punting. This is just maybe slightly lessening the odds of winning for the bigger picture to be kept in mind long-term over the course of a season. And I don't know that there's a perfect word for it like there is for punting, because that one's very good and it's very obvious and everyone understands what it means. But like, that's more what this is. This is not a case of like we're giving up on this game by putting Tyler Alexander in. That's not the case at all. But it might just be the best trade-off in terms of long-term and short-term, what you're getting out of your bullpen and keeping everyone fresh and trying to survive a long season while also still competing. It's not a trade-off of one or the other. It's just trying to find the balance. And I think that might be what's missing in my eyes more than anything, is finding the balance. It's not a complete one or the other situation.
The thing that I always try to stress is, in the short term, you can win games while having a bad process, and you can lose games while having a good process. But when you zoom it out and then you look at 162, more wins in 162 is likely going to stem from good process, and then fewer wins in 162 is going to stem from bad process. And that's what we keep trying to get at with this. Like, if I am looking at one specific game out of 162, yeah, I'm going to, just from an analysis perspective, I'm going to care more about the process than what the result was in that game, knowing that if there are signs that the Brewers have a good process and that they're sticking to that as often as possible, they're going to put themselves in the best possible position to win games over a longer stretch of time, which is what it's all about. In the regular season, that's what it's all about. The game completely changes in the playoffs because you're not managing for length. But when you're managing regular season games in May like it's a playoff game, that's, you're going to be in trouble. We did get a question on this, though. Ryan asked us via email, what if Murphy's heavy usage of the A pen was to keep the team in contention, knowing that this is a rough stretch that they needed to survive, and knowing that reinforcements in Hall, Ashby, Quintana, Savali, and Woodruff were on the way? The old, you can't win a division in April or May, but you can lose one. What say you? Plausible or no? I do think that's part of it. I think I mean, we've talked about it a little bit. Like, this is everything about a lot of, or not everything, a lot of things about the way that Pat Murphy has managed this team this year. And this is like on the field, but then also like all the team meetings and all this stuff. Like I've said it before, it's given off this vibe of a manager who knows that things are bad, and he's like pulling out every page in the book, trying to stop the ship from sinking. And I get what he's going for. I really do. But again, like there's a line where, can that actually be counterproductive? Like if you're calling team meetings every, twice in 2 road trips, like is the point really going to be getting across at that point if the team meetings have to be this frequent? Or in the case of the bullpen, yes, I get what he's going for, and I do think that's part of it. I think I think he's been feeling a lot of intensity. Like these have probably felt like playoff games to him, because like we've talked about, this team has shown a lot of signs of a team that just didn't have it. Like they've been sliding for most of the year, just kind of running in place. The wheels have been spinning. We've talked about it plenty. But with the bullpen, like, is it going to dig you out of that hole if Nick Mears is completely shot and he's still being thrown out there and he's not pitching well because he's shot? Like, that's the line you still need to be thinking about. So yes, I get what you're saying. I think that is part of why Murphy's done it this way. I don't think that justifies it to the extent that he's done it, though. Like, I could even see if it's like, hey, like maybe there's this week-long stretch of games where I'm going to hit the hammer a little bit more than normal. Like, I mean, Craig would do that sometimes too.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
that's not, but like for as to have it going on the way that it's been going on lately, this has been pretty extreme. And hopefully now with like these leverage long relievers that they've got coming back, he backs off a little bit, but it's not a great sign to me when 2 days ago he acknowledges that the workload's going to have, adverse effects on guys if it continues this way. And then on Tuesday, he says, yeah, like we'd like to, we're with the workload for Mears. We're going to try to see if we can back off of him. And then the next day, Nick Mears is pitching 2 innings coming in when the Brewers are trailing. Like it doesn't line up. It's, you're saying one thing and then you're doing the opposite thing. That's not a good sign. But hopefully it changes. We'll see. I don't want to spend too much more time on this because I don't think there's a whole lot new for us to say here. There's a lot of things like we keep saying that have gotten the Brewers into this situation. It's that they don't hit, so they never have any breathing
Yes.
room. Like this is a bad lineup, and that's far and away the biggest problem with this team. But it's like if you're the guys making the decisions in games, you can't let that push you too far into bad process. And I think that's what we're seeing happen. Like it's a bad situation already through no fault of Pat Murphy or the guys who are helping him make any pitching decisions. That's not his fault that they're in this situation to begin with, but they can still set some guardrails to prevent it from, turning into the reliever availability dumpster fire that it's looked
Yeah.
like for the last, 10 days or so here.
Yeah. The only thing I will say on this is, like Jack acknowledged, and like we've said all the time, like the biggest problem is clearly the offense. The thing is, the offense can't just be fixed with a snap of your fingers. You can choose and make the decision to start changing the way you do your bullpen processes. And that can happen literally in one day. You can change how you're handling things. So when we talk about these things, that is, for me, that's a big reason why we harp on this more than the offense. The offense isn't going to just all of a sudden be great. Like it can't happen. Process stuff can change overnight. That is literally something that can change in the snap of a finger. Like that's it. You can be completely different with how you handle things overnight. It can't be that way with offense. So that's why I think that's something for me personally. That's why I think the focus on that has been so heavy for us. I think the offense is probably going to be a little bit better. Again, I still think Yelich, Contreras are going to be better. At this point, we are seeing like Terang and Frelick are basically at where we would expect them to be. I think Frelick's probably a little bit higher. I'd honestly say Terang might be a little lower than I was expecting after the beginning of the year. And I do think that illness screwed him up a little bit for a little bit. But like for the most part, I think outside of the guys you expected, Reese is probably overperforming a little bit, but I think he can be like an 800 plus OPS guy. Like I don't think that's a shock if he does that. So now it's a matter of, I actually could see if Churio, Yelich, and Contreras get going to what they're capable of. I think the offense can be better than it has been. But again, that's not something that just changes immediately. Whereas I think any process stuff, that's something that can change really quickly. And that's why it's something that I think is important to note.
Let's go over some injury stuff really quick. We'll talk about Jose Quintana and Brandon Woodruff, 2 rehabbing starters. Quintana threw a rehab game on Tuesday in Appleton, went 4 innings. Everything came out fine from that outing. Adam McCalvy reporting that he's planning to rejoin the rotation on Sunday at Philadelphia, so we'll see him back into the mix pretty quickly here. Brandon Woodruff made another rehab start in Appleton as well on Wednesday, and Pat Murphy saying that the plan was going to be likely go to Nashville for a rehab start after that, and then after that one, they'd reevaluate. Is he ready to join the big league rotation? Does he need more? The velo in that Appleton start, I wasn't watching the entire thing super closely. I know you were paying attention to it a little more, but like a lot of 88s, 89s, and then touching 92s again instead of the 92 touching 94 and maybe 95. Like it's not good right now. This isn't good enough.
Yeah. somebody did point this out in the forums on Brewer Fanatic, and I do think there might be a little something to this. I do remember in the middle of his rehab starts, he made one in Appleton. He was in Nashville for most of them, but he made one in Appleton, and his velo was down a little bit on the board there. I do also recall having seen guys like Mizorowski and some others in Appleton. I do wonder if the gun is a little slow there. And I hadn't thought of that, but it does, like, when I think back to seeing some other guys and having seen them then pitch on Statcast and or other things, like sometimes the velo is like a tick or two down in Appleton. So maybe it's a case where, the ball's getting picked up midway home instead of right out of the hand or something on the stadium gun. Like I don't know exactly where it is. I don't have the TrackMan data from this outing. So that did give me at least like the slightest bit of hope, but this is where it's been in the Nashville rehab starts since that ankle thing popped up as well. So it's just not where it needs to be for him to be ready. And I think it is going to take a little bit longer. We talked about it last time. We're not going to rehash all of that, but the results were great today. 7 innings, 5 hits. He didn't give up an earned run. He struck out 6, no walks. He was, I would say, watching a decent amount of it. I watched it later on, actually. I wasn't watching it live, but while we were waiting to record this, I was watching it back, and the command was actually pretty good. Like, he was hitting spots. It was kind of where you want the pitches to be, which hadn't been the case lately. But that velo is just, it needs to be in like that 91 to 93 range, maybe getting up a little bit higher for me to feel comfortable. I can't be seeing 80s very often at all. Like that's where it starts to get a little concerning. So I will be very closely monitoring that next one when he is in Nashville, when there's Statcast data. Maybe, like I said, it's possible the gun is a little slow in Appleton and that changes things, but I'm not just going to say that's absolutely the case. And I really need to see what it looks like. If it looks anything like this, he should not be returning the game after that. I know that's kind of like the tentative plan, but I don't think he will, to be clear. If it's not up, I don't think he will. So hopefully we see it up and hopefully we see him back, because I think it would be awesome to see Woodruff on a major league mound, but I don't think it would be awesome to see him rushed in any way and not be what he's capable of being right now, because that's not going to be good for anybody.
Got to stay patient. Like we've talked about, there's plenty of ups and downs that can come with coming back from what he's coming back from.
Yeah.
So got to stay patient. And there's never going to be a point in bringing him back when he's not ready.
No.
So we'll see how that next rehab start looks, and Brewers will go from there. Final note on the rehabbing pitcher, Connor Thomas pitched in a rehab game in the ACL on Monday. So he's starting to work his way back. He had been down in Arizona for a little bit throwing before that, but officially starting a rehab assignment at that level earlier this week. Michael asked us an injury question, just asking for if there's any word on Garrett Mitchell and Blake Perkins. There's nothing new on Mitchell, really. As far as Perkins goes, the holdup for him is still it's running.
Yeah.
When he tries to run, he just does not respond well to that. There's still pain. Like if he runs one day, the next day he's going to be feeling more pain from running the day before. That's kind of where he's at right now. So he's just plateaued a little bit. And that's a big hurdle for him to clear. He's got to be able to move around. He's got to be able to go full intensity and not be feeling any repercussions from that. And right now, that's last we've heard from Pat Murphy, that's still not the case. So he's kind of stuck in that spot right now as long as that remains true. We'll take a few more questions here as we dive into some miscellaneous topics. Start with Lucas, who is asking about how this pitching staff could look. So if Woodruff and Quintana come back soon, Chad Patrick's probably the odd man out just because he's got options left. So he asks, when Patrick gets sent down to AAA, who will have the better rotation, the Brewers or the Sounds? So MLB, you're looking at Peralta, Quintana, Savali, Quinn Priester, and Brendan Woodruff in this scenario. AAA, Jacob Mizorowski, Logan Henderson, Chad Patrick, Tobias Myers, and Carlos Rodriguez. I would probably still take the MLB rotation. It's maybe a little closer than anyone should be comfortable with.
Right.
But as good as Henderson's been, as good as Patrick's been, I don't know if you can quite yet be putting more stock in those guys than
Yeah.
Aaron Savali or Jose Quintana, like two big league starters who obviously don't have the ceiling of those of Henderson specifically, really, but an established track record of eating innings at a solid level in the big leagues. I think there's still a lot to be said for that. And then Peralta as well. I don't think there's anyone who's matching Peralta's combination of both floor and ceiling in the big leagues in that rotation in the minor leagues. Obviously, Miz is electric. Henderson, we've seen a lot of good things from him. But I'm still taking that big league group over that AAA one, I think.
Yeah, I would too. I think because of the floor, but I think if you're looking at it, there's absolutely a world where if that 5-man rotation in AAA was your 5-man in MLB, I could see the results being better because of the upside that they all do possess, or especially the first two. And then we've seen what Tobias Myers can do when things are going right at the big league level. So, and same with Chad Patrick. And then I think Woodruff and Priester are Woodruff coming off his injury is a bit of a question mark, and Priester I would still consider a question mark at this point for sure. And I would say Carlos Rodriguez is even more of one, obviously, without the experience, but you can see some of the stuff that he's capable of doing. And like you said, Vinny Rotino did do a very good job during that rain delay, breaking down some of the changes. And the command has improved quite a bit this year, I would say, just having watched him a decent amount. So I'm not going to hold the lack of it during a rainy, very rainy day while he was pitching in Pittsburgh. And then also after having come back out after the rain delay and being pushed even probably a little longer than he should have been after that too, against him. So I think he has made legitimate strides. So I can see a world where AAA's rotation performs better than MLB, but in terms of experience, just a safer, higher floor, it's still the MLB rotation. But I think you could easily make an argument that you could replace a couple of the AAA guys and put them in MLB for some of the guys in MLB, and that would be your best rotation. But it is a good question, and like Jack said, it's not concerning, but it's a little. It feels a little weird that there's a legitimate thought between the two. Like you have to think about it at least a little bit, which is not normally the case. Normally, that would be a pretty cut and dry answer, I think.
Lance asks, could they move Quinn Priester to the pen rather than option Patrick when Woody returns? But then that would still leave you with too many guys. Would be a shame to send Patrick down. I think it's possible, because then you have the ability to, you're optioning like Ashby or Hall or one of those kind of guys to make room. I don't know that that's the way they would go because I think they like Priester enough as a starter where they're not going to want to shift him over. And the other side of this too is optioning Patrick and then just keeping that rotation as is. That's just the best. Like you're keeping everybody stretched out and on schedule. If you're moving someone to the bullpen, that is going to mess in a way. It still kind of cuts into your starting depth a little bit because they're no longer pitching in these fully stretched out outings. They're not on like they're every 5 days. Like things do get a little out of whack there. So my guess is, I mean, maybe it's something they could weigh. I would be surprised if they did it though.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you could DFA Alexander. Well, I guess that could happen with Quintana coming back, actually. So yeah, at that point, you would have to option somebody. It does get iffy. For me, I mean, the main thing is that I just would not be that concerned about Quinn Priester burning his final option year. Personally, I just don't think that would be as big a deal as the Brewers seem to. But since they do, and that clearly is going to weigh in heavily, I think the easiest thing and the best thing to do in that scenario is to option Patrick and let him stay on the starter schedule. Again, we don't really know what Woodruff is going to be. There are going to be more injuries. You allow him to stay a starter, and then when that next time through, when they need a new starter, you have him and Henderson who can both kind of jump into whatever fits the rotation best, wherever the injury happens, whatever timeline they're on. I think that's the best way to maintain the depth, and I get that to an extent, but I do think at some point this season you have to question, like, what is our best rotation, and are we running the best rotation out there? And I'm not sure that would be in that moment, but I think, again, at this point in the season, I would understand why they might go that direction. So I think that's the easiest way to handle it if Priester is basically guaranteed to be staying up.
HC Purdy asks, if the Brewers are in contention and the A's aren't, what would you think of trading for Luis Arias, former Brewer? Between this and Orlando RC getting cut, you're seeing like everything pop up with speculating and some people seemingly hoping that the Brewers would reunite with old friends.
Yeah, luckily RCA is signing with Colorado, it sounds like, so we won't have to worry about that one much longer. I did have a little bit of a a bad feeling when I saw that news break. I was like, oh, with the situation the Brewers are in, I could even talk myself into understanding why they did it. I wouldn't like it, but I could understand why they did it to an extent. I'm glad that doesn't seem like it's going to be on the table. Urias is, I mean, the bat is still not where it was at his best with the Brewers, but he is having a nice little offensive bounce back. I was looking at the numbers earlier. I mean, he is not whiffing. He's not striking out. He's drawing walks. The pop isn't really there, and he was never a huge power guy, obviously, but he did show some pop in that. I believe it was 2022 was his best season with the Brewers. The defense still sucks at third base, and it's not good at all. That is a little difficult for me. This is somebody who I get it. Well, Durbin's not a good defender at third either, so you could make the argument that, well, you're just at least trading off the bat. If they made a deal and it was a reasonable price to acquire him, like, I'm not going to complain. I think it'd be worth a shot in that type of situation because there is some upside with the bat. There is a guy who at least fits with the Brewers in terms of swing decisions and what they like in that way. They like guys who don't whiff. They like guys who can get the ball and play. Urias is not fast like most of the people who are on the Brewers who do that. That is still one of the craziest. Just, he lost so much speed in such little time at such a young age. It's kind of mind blowing to me. Like, he first came up to the big leagues and he was in the 80th percentile for sprint speed. And if I remember looking today, it was around 15th or 20th percentile or something. Like, it's very low. He has lost multiple steps and he's still not an old dude at all. But I guess I could talk myself into it at the right price, but it's not something I would be actively searching out, is probably my too long didn't read answer.
I've already started wondering if, like, this is the year that the Brewers trade for Connor Falefa at the deadline. There were reports that they had interest in him a year ago before he signed in free agency. Like, he slightly below average bat, but good defense all around the infield. Like, this decently high floor, just as a guy who you can roll out there and be okay with. Like, if they're in contention, and they've done interdivisional trades with the Pirates before, so it wouldn't be unprecedented. You know, they did it with Jordan Lyles. They did it with Carlos Santana a couple of years ago. Maybe this is the year that happens. I don't know, but that's a name that's in my mind right now.
Yeah, makes sense for sure.
Kind of what the situation looks like as time goes on. Last question, that we'll take for this section comes from Kevin. He asks, at what point do you think about teaching Abner a changeup? I feel like it's the next step in his development to have a change of pace pitch that has some fade, whether it's a changeup or even a split like Chapman. So the first thing we got to get out of the way here, and we're talking about Abner potentially throwing a changeup. Number one, I'm not sure he needs it as a one-inning leverage guy, especially because I think the slider is already a really big change of pace from the fastball, from the sinker. Like, he's throwing, almost sitting 99 with the sinker. And for a guy who has that much velo, like, because he throws a little more of a sweeping slider, his slider's actually, it doesn't have a ton of velo relative to the fastball. So I think he already changes it up pretty good with those two pitches. But I mean, if you want something softer with some fade to throw to lefties, maybe, if you just look at like his Savant page and how he releases the baseball, he's a guy who gets on the side of it again. He's got a supination bias. It's hard for guys to throw a changeup when they're so, like, again, he naturally releases the ball more on the outside of the ball. He gets the run on the sinker because he's got like seam effects working for him. So he's got seam shifted wake. He's got the seams on that ball oriented in just the right way where he can actually be on the outside of it. But because there's more the distribution of the air around the seams is not equal on each side of the ball. It's going to kick it to the arm side and give it that run and that sink that you see, even if he's not necessarily spinning it that way. It's tough for a guy like that to throw a changeup. If you're going to get there, usually a kick changeup is the way you do it, because that's how you can get that baseball to side spin without having to actually pronate the ball. So that's one way he can go. But in his case, you mentioned Chapman with the splitter. I think that's the way he'd probably have to go if he's going to throw another pitch. He's a big guy. He's got big hands. That's usually the kind of pitch that those guys fare best with if they're looking for that third pitch. But again, I don't think it's really something he needs. If it's a direction they want to go, though, I think you're probably looking at splitter for him.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see, maybe even, you're going maybe like that Splinker type route with a guy like Duran for the Twins, or, even Skeens has added that. Like, you could see maybe that working for him. In terms of it, really, it's a splitter, but it's just thrown so hard and maybe not quite as much separation on the fingers around the ball, and you just use that to take 5-6 miles per hour off of a pitch, which I could see, like, with that fastball, I could see that helping him in certain situations, maybe against a lefty who you've gone away from him a couple times and now you drop it off the table a little bit away from him on the splitter type pitch. But I do agree with Jack where I think it's not necessary for him. He did in the minors try to throw changeups from time to time. It's not like it was part of his repertoire when he was in the lower minors, but it was bad. It was not a good pitch. And for all the reasons Jack talked about, it's a hard pitch to throw when you're a supinator. The Brewers just generally don't seem to be big into the business of the kick change. I don't know if it's not an easy pitch to teach, I should say, or learn. So they may just not be comfortable trying to teach it with guys, which is fine. If you're not comfortable with it, you shouldn't be trying to teach it. But it does kind of suck because there are some guys on the team that's like, oh, that would probably make some sense for them. I think that's the only way it works if it's not a splitter. Otherwise, it has to be a splitter. And I don't think he ends up adding one. Maybe further down the road, if the velo starts to tail off a little bit as he gets older or something, it's something that he adds as more of a necessary pitch for him. But right now, I don't think it's at that point.
It's time for the minor league sandbox. Go.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we got a question on the minor league side of things as well from HC Purdy. He asked, do you think Freddie Zamora or Ethan Murray could help on the left side of the infield? They've been in the organization for a while, and Zamora was a fairly high draft pick. He was a second-round pick in the COVID draft the same year that Garrett Mitchell was drafted out of Miami. Zamora, first I'll touch on Murray. Murray is currently on the IL, and he has been in Double-A all year. I like Ethan Murray. I actually like Ethan Murray more than Zamora in terms of being any sort of prospect. But I don't think he'd be ready all that soon. And I don't know that to me, he's more of a right side of the infield guy at this point. The arm could probably handle the left side, but he's a good second baseman. The Brewers don't have a ton of use for that. Defensively, Zamora's solid at shortstop. He's fine. He had really big error issues earlier in his minor league career, but he's cleaned those up pretty well, and it's not much of an issue for him at this point. The bat is not good. I know the surface level stats look pretty good for him. He doesn't strike out. He doesn't whiff. He walks a little bit. Not a little bit. He walks at above average rate. The surface slash line looks pretty good. He just has nothing in the bat. And I mean, we talked about Caleb Durbin in terms of his type of power. That's Zamora, if not even a little bit less juice in the bat than Durbin has. And not the same type of batted ball profile either, where he's like somebody who tucks him in the line and can get to some of that power. It's just not really there for him. He has a 0% barrel rate this year. His average exit velocity is 86. His 90th percentile exit velocity is under 100, which is very, very low. His max is still well below average at 107. Like there's not a lot there offensively. And I think he's just quad A depth right now who he's filling in. They've got injuries down there. They've got guys like Monasterio moving up. They've got everything else going on with some, Siegler's had his injuries, they have played Oliver Dunn at short a little bit. We haven't really ever talked about that, but Dunn has played some shortstop in AAA, and he's looked okay over there. Not super shocking. He's a pretty good defender. But yeah, right now he's doing a good job. He's helping Nashville, which is cool. That's obviously important too. They want to win games down there, but to me, just a quad A type, not really anything there. Speaking of quad A types, we got a question from Will asking about Bobby Dahlbeck, mentioning that he knows he's an ultimate quad A guy like Keston Hiura, but do you think he was signed to potentially be insurance if third base stays stagnant or just minor league depth at this point? So he first of all, he's only played one game at third since he was acquired. He hasn't played a lot of third recently in his career. Mostly first base, some corner outfield. He's hitting pretty well. I think if he ends up in the big leagues, it's because there was a bunch of injuries and probably a bunch of people sold at the deadline, and maybe he gets a chance to fill in some spots there. I don't think he's anything more than depth. I think he is kind of just a quad A guy, like you mentioned. So that's kind of where I'll leave it. But he's been helping Nashville. He was a triple away from the cycle when we started recording tonight. So he has power. He was obviously a big name at one point, a big prospect, but there's still just a lot of swing and miss in there, and it's just not a great profile in general. Quick injury update. Luis Pena was reinstated from the 7-day IL. It was basically a minimum stay after he ran into a first baseman, collision at first base. Ended up with a little bit of a concussion, but it must not have been too bad. Back in the lineup today for their doubleheader. When we started recording in game 2, he was 2 for 2 with a walk and a triple. Just picked up pretty much right where he left off. He's up to a 930 OPS as of the recording as well. So he's very good. This is a legitimate top prospect in baseball at this point. I think top 50 for my money for sure. So moving on to some of the hitters, unfortunate news on one of them, but we'll touch on what he'd been doing before we get into the bad news. Hedbert Perez this week had a 1030 OPS. He had a 118 WRC plus on the season. He had his lowest strikeout rate of his career, 24.6%, which is about a 5% drop from where he sat most of the time in full season ball. It's a pretty reasonable place to be at that point. He was really coming into his own this year. Like this was an improved player. The bat was better. The defense, it was up and down. He makes some really good plays. He has some lapses in the outfield. He's got a very strong arm, and it's pretty accurate as well. He was coming into his own. He was still only 22. Unfortunately, he was stealing second base last night, Wednesday night or Tuesday night, and slid in head first, and he appeared to hurt his left shoulder pretty badly. Taken out of the game. Haven't really heard an update yet, but it looked bad. He was in a lot of pain. So we'll hope that was just kind of a weird situation and he ends up being okay, but it would be super unfortunate for a guy who was at one point really hyped up, who seemed to really be figuring things out, and just a really tough break for him. And he's had injury issues the last couple of years as well. So hopefully nothing too big, but it didn't look good. Speaking of a guy who had some more hype a couple of years ago and kind of fell off the prospect map, not entirely. I mean, Fangraphs still put him number 10 on their list a couple weeks ago. But Luis Lara, 935 OPS this week. He's up to a 120 WRC plus in AA as a 20-year-old. He is an elite defender. I'm kind of past the point of calling him a plus defender. Like he's an elite defensive center fielder. He's the best defensive center fielder in the minor leagues for the Brewers, or outfielder in general, I should say. And it's a plus arm despite being about 5'8". I mean, really, when you watch him, it's very Self-Frelick-esque. Like it's balls to the wall. He's going to dive for everything. He's going to run into a wall. He's going to just go as hard as he can. And then from a smaller stature, he's going to have a cannon of an arm. And we saw that a lot this week with Sal as well, with multiple outfield assists in the Pirates and Red Sox series. The fact that the bat has come around, he's 20 years old in AA, and beyond that, offensively, he is also 18 for 18 on stolen bases for a guy who was kind of running like a 70 to 75% success rate on stolen bases at the lower levels. Something flipped here, and he's very much back on my radar. I don't think this is like a small change. I don't think this is something. His plate discipline is way better. He is walking more. He's whiffing less. The strikeouts are actually up like a percentage overall, but I think that's because he's not going after like the first and second pitch early in at bats and getting himself out on weak contact. Like this is, to me, this is a real breakout for a guy who was kind of based on potential and was being pushed very aggressively the whole time by the Brewers. I wrote about him and one of the other guys I'll talk about later in the pitcher section over at Brewer Fanatic, which you can check out. It'll hopefully be a weekly article that I do just kind of with some of my observations on what I saw, less of a like statistical thing and more of a breakdown on what I'm seeing. So Lara was the focus of the first one, along with Marco Dinges, who I'm not talking about here, and then also one of the pitchers I'll get to in a little bit. Moving to the next hitter, though, Filippo Dituri, one guy that I have not been very high on myself. He had a 12.22 OPS this week. He hit another homer. He has a 136 WRC plus on the season, up to 6 home runs now. He had played 2 pro seasons before this, and he had hit 2 total home runs. So the power showed up kind of out of nowhere. They're not super cheap either. I've seen all of them. They're not like just wall scrapers in that they have a really short corner in Carolina, but I think only one of them's kind of fit that description. Like I said, I've been lower on him the most, but he's adjusting very well. He's 19 years old. He's in low A, showing power. The glove is solid. I think some people might have talked it up a little bit more than it is. I don't think it's great, but I think he's a fine defender at all 3 infield spots too. So he might start moving up my personal list a little bit if I keep seeing what I'm seeing right now. Another injury guy, I guess I should have mentioned earlier, Jefferson Cairo. Last night, Tuesday night, had a 4-hit game in the ACL with a homer. He's very much he's too advanced for ACL pitching. There's no doubt about that. He's got a 1269 OPS, a 218 WRC plus, and 3 homers during this rehab stint. Very nice to just see the bat working in general, though. I mean, that's really good to see. He's still walking more than striking out down there. The strikeout rate's like 11% or something. Like the bat looks like it is ready to go back to AAA. What we haven't heard still is any reports on his arm. Runners are 9 for 10 against him on stolen bases, but it's very hard to say at that level. Rookie ball pitchers just are not good at holding runners, and there could be big jumps. There's no way to say if that is meaningful at all. I really want to see him on video in Nashville, start to see what it actually looks like, but the bat looks ready. I don't think he's very far off from being back in AAA. The last one we'll talk about is Juan Ortuño. I haven't mentioned him this year. He was featured a lot last year as one of the other DSL players who was performing extremely well. He had a 1042 OPS this week. He hit a homer. It was his 3rd of the season. He's at a 155 WRC plus for the season. He's only listed at 5'8", 165. Just seeing some of the video, I think he's filled out a little bit more than that. I would bet. I mean, that's his signing weight and height. I would bet he weighs more than that and has better weight now. But like, it's not a big guy. But he's had exit velocities, and they've only had 2 Statcast games, but he had one at 109 miles per hour in one of them. So we know he's capable of hitting the ball pretty hard. He's hit 3 homers at his size. He does not strike out. He draws walks. He plays infield and outfield. I don't think this is ever going to be a guy who's like a huge prospect, but I think he's one of those guys who like, he might be a solid utility type that just keeps moving through the system and eventually makes his way there, because there's a lot of tools here, and the fact that he can handle a lot of positions definitely helps him as well. Moving to the pitching side and sticking with our one ACL pitcher for this one, Wenderling King, DSL guy last year, up in the ACL this year. He's 19 until late August. He went 4 innings. He struck out 4. He didn't walk anybody in his latest appearance. Between the DSL last year and the ACL this year, he has a 51-9 strikeout to walk ratio. So that's noteworthy. Does a very good job of limiting his walks. Decent strikeouts. He's thrown, I think, 47, 48 innings in that time too. So more than a strikeout per inning. Velo's in the low 90s. He's like 90 to 91 on the video that I've been able to find of him. It doesn't look like the greatest fastball shape to me, but the curve and slider are both pretty good pitches. They're definitely different shapes. They're definitely sharp, both of them. The changeup, I saw a couple that looked pretty good. I saw a couple that were very flat and didn't have much depth to them. Definitely a work in progress, but he does kill a little bit of velo on it. I think it's like a 6 or 7 mile per hour difference on the changeup, which he's got a little bit of feel for doing some things with it. So it might be a pitch that he can add as he keeps moving, but an interesting arm, another guy that I haven't really touched on much before. Bryce Message returned from an illness that he had a couple of weeks ago. I was told he was puking. He skipped a start last week, and some people were concerned, but he was throwing up all game during his previous start, and he actually hit 98.5 miles per hour on the gun during that start, despite that. So pretty impressive. He wasn't quite that high on the velo in his return, kind of sitting 94, 95. I think I saw a 96 on the score bug that was showing the velo, but 4 innings, 1 hit, 5 strikeouts, 1 walk, no earned runs. Another really solid start from him. He has been very impressive this year when he's been able to go out there. Ryan Burchard, a name that I haven't talked about a ton, but he's a guy that I liked a lot at draft time a couple years ago. He went 6 innings, 5 hits, struck out 7, only walked 1, only allowed 1 earned run in his start this past week. He's sitting 92 to 94 on the fastball. He had been up to like 98, 99 even in college when he was at Niagara, which is a junior college, community college. He was a guy that I actually pegged as somebody that the Brewers would probably like quite a bit, and he was on my list for day 2, and they ended up picking him. The fastball has very good characteristics, despite the velo not being quite as high as I thought it might be. He pitched in the AFL this year, so we got a little bit of StatCast data on him, but the fastball's got good characteristics. He's got a slider and a curveball, and they are both good pitches with quite a bit of movement. The changeup has improved from where it was when he was drafted, but still, that's by far the worst pitch in the group. But this showed what can happen when he commands the ball. He went to the AFL, like I said, the stats or the movement stuff looked really good. The whiff rates were fantastic. The strikeout rate was pretty good, but the walk rate was unbelievably high. It was in the 20s. This type of start shows what can happen if he can just be in and around the zone more consistently. I did watch this one. He looked good. I will note he does appear to be in better shape as well this year. He had gotten injured last year. When he came back, he looked bigger than he was at the beginning of the year after a really good start in Carolina. So I think he might be in a better place physically as well. So I'll definitely be keeping an eye on him. I will be talking about him more, hopefully, if things continue to go well for him. A minor league Rule 5 pick in this last year's Rule 5 draft, Zach Peak, is in Appleton. He had 2 relief appearances this week, 3 1/3 innings total, 2 hits, 7 strikeouts, and 1 walk. Sitting 91 to 93 on the fastball. He went very heavy on the short slider usage that he has. It's an 85, 87 mile per hour pitch. It might even be a cutter with just a lot of movement on it. It was a good pitch. South Bend Cubs hitters really, really struggled to do anything with it. He actually didn't even get a ton of the strikeouts on it. He got him on the fastball and the curveball, but that was the pitch that just set up everything else for him. So it seems like that might be his primary pitch this year. It was a good pitch. Curveball's true 12-6, and it's not bad. It's upper 70s. It's got sharp. I mean, it is true 12-6. It's straight up and down, and it got some pretty bad swings against it as well. He throws a mid-80s changeup. In those 2 appearances, he definitely didn't have feel for it. I saw him pitch, or I looked at video when he's got drafted in the Rule 5 draft, and there were some good ones mixed in, especially even against the Mudcats. He had a really good one against Eric Batanti. So I do think it's a pitch he can throw, but he didn't have it in these 2 appearances. Final guy I'm going to talk about today, Brett Wichrowski, a guy who had a ton of helium going into last year, moved to AA very quickly, and then things didn't go super well for him. He was hurt to start this year. He was building up, and then he ended up on the IL for 7 days. So I think there was a little bit of a hitch in his buildup. But when he got to Biloxi last year, he was kind of sitting in like that 93, 95 range. And the rumor and everything we had seen all spring was that, he was touching 100. He had touched 101. He was sitting like 95 to 98 in spring. And then even in his first couple starts with the T-Rats, that velo did not travel to Biloxi last year. I was watching his start, this one I'm talking about right now. He was up to 98 again. He was sitting 94 to 96. He touched 97 a lot. Really, he was kind of sitting 94 to 97, frankly, with how often he was hitting 97. He throws 3 different breaking balls if you consider, it depends on what you call one of them, but there's a true sweeper, there's a true curveball, and then there is a slider / cutter. So it's kind of a shorter slider, similar to what I was talking about with Peak in like the upper 80s, but a good pitch for him. He does struggle with like consistent shape on the fastball. It seems like he accidentally cuts it. He accidentally runs it. They're not meant to do that. He says he only throws one fastball. So that's, to me, maybe the biggest thing that's held him back right now. It's nice to see that velo back, though, and he had a really good game. The whiffs had not been there in the first 3 games. The velo wasn't quite up to that standard. But again, coming off injury, coming off a late buildup, he might just be starting to hit his stride. It's only been 4 starts so far this year. So if anything, I want to see the fastball shape become more consistent, or he can split it into different pitches if he wants, but then he needs to know what they're going to do. It kind of feels like he doesn't know exactly what each fastball is going to do every time he throws it. And that's a tough place to be in as a pitcher and a catcher. Catchers don't like that. I promise you that. But we'll see where he goes from here. But it was really, really nice to see the velo back where I had been seeing it very early last year. So we'll see if that maintains a little better this year. But that will do it for the minor league sandbox this time around. And yeah, it's the pitching. The pitching has not been. I didn't even talk about Tyson Harden, who had a great outing again, because I just feel like I talk about him every time. But the pitching has been kind of overlooked this year. I think there's been a lot of good pitching performances, along with all the exciting bats as well.
Good stuff down on the farm from our resident prospect expert. Is that what they bill you as still, the prospect specialist?
I think that's what they put in the description of the podcast. Yeah.
Okay. Should really be more on top of how they're branding our program, but shows how much attention I pay to things that I should be more on top of. Thank you for listening this week to the Brewer Fanatic podcast. I feel like I was just kind of sluggish through this one. I'm very tired. It's been a long week for me, so I'm sorry if that influenced the quality of this week's episode. But if you made it this far, thank you for bearing with us. We'll be back at the usual time next week. We went a week early today. I got to head out of town on Thursday, but we'll have all the action for you in the following week. Some more analysis. See if the Brewers can get on a little run here. This was, they got in the win column more. We were talking about it before we jumped on here. Like, I'm not sure the quality of the play has actually improved that much, but there have been a couple moments that I think you can circle as, moments where maybe things start to come together a little bit. Mm-hmm. We'll see. We've talked a lot about the red flags we've seen on this team. But that's why you play the games. And we'll be back next week to break them down. Thank you all for listening.